Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. My name is Jane and today we're going to talk about some more misconceptions about gods. And I'm going to tell you why these are misconceptions. So I already made 2 videos about this, so if you haven't watched them yet, I recommend watching them first and then watching this video. But I do recommend watching them all, even if it's in a different order or something. Because there's just a lot of misconception about gods and I think it's just really interesting. And I hope to teach you some new things in these videos. I am not making this video to judge anyone who has these misconceptions about gods, and I'm not sending hate towards anyone who believes that these misconceptions are true. This is just an informative video and just for entertainment, and it's not meant in any bad way. So the first misconception is that gods are all into dark and macabre things. I don't actually know if I pronounce the word macabre right, so I'm just gonna say dark things from now on. And I mean macabre things too, but I just don't want to embarrass myself by saying it wrong over and over again, so just so you know that. Being goth is being into goth music, but it doesn't always have something to do with being into dark stuff. Now I do have to admit, a lot of goths are actually into dark things. You can probably see that around me. I am really into dark things. Not all goths are. There's a lot of goths who, for example, are into dark music and the dark aesthetic. But some goths just really don't like horror movies, dark movies. Some people don't like seeing blood, some people really don't like to think about death. And also not all goths are into skulls and dead things like me. I do like to collect these kind of things, and in my aesthetic I also like to use skulls and skeletons. This is just not something that every goth likes, because as you can probably understand, skulls and dark things make people feel uncomfortable or bad or scared, and it makes some goth people feel the same way. I have a really stupid example of this, but for example, I am really into dark things, but I don't like horror movies with jump scares, because jump scares scare me so much that I just don't want to watch the movie if there's a jump scare in it. So it's not like every goth is really cool and really just immune to everything that is scary and dark. Like, that is not a thing. Dark things are kind of part of the goth thingies, but you don't have to be into dark things and dead things in order to be goth. So yeah, if you are a goth and you're not into everything that is dark, don't be ashamed, that's totally normal. And if you know a goth, don't assume that they are into dark and macabre things, if I'm pronouncing that right. So this misconception is actually something that a viewer of mine talked about in the comments, and it's that goth people can only listen to goth music. Now I can't really understand why people actually think this, because logically people listen to all kinds of music and it would be kind of boring, in my opinion, to only listen to one music type. But there are some people who are either kind of gatekeeping the goth subculture, or people who just don't know a lot about goth culture, that think that goths are only allowed to listen to goth music. And there's probably some people who only like listening to goth music because some people just aren't into music as a whole, but only into goth music, for example. But I think like 99% of the goth people do not only listen to goth music. Most people just listen to a lot of different music types, and goth is just one of them, or like the main one, and that is why they call themselves goth. Being goth is just liking goth music. It doesn't really have to be your whole life, and your whole life doesn't have to revolve around only listening to that kind of music, only listening to like the OG bands and artists. You can totally listen to other music if you're goth, like kind of logical. Because it would be kind of boring to only listen to the same music over and over again, in my opinion. For example, I'm really into goth music, which is actually my main type of music that I listen to. But I'm also really into metal, I'm into rock, I'm into rap, I'm into drum and bass, I'm into like a lot of different things. So yeah, it's totally normal to like different things as a goth. It's not an obligation that you only listen to goth music to be goth. Maybe a lot of people just turned goth all of a sudden when I just said this, but yeah, if you listen to goth music sometimes and you really like it, I think you can just call yourself a goth. Like, I don't even care. There's also just a lot of misconceptions about goth music as a thing, because there are some people who think that goth music means metal, which isn't the same thing at all. There's a lot of people who think Slipknot and that sort of stuff is goth music, or Korn, which is actually music that a lot of goths do listen to, but it's not like the typical goth music. If you're really talking about like the goth bands, that's like Bauhaus, Susie and the Banshees, the Sisters of Mercy, Specimen, all that sort of stuff. And there's also just a lot of discussion about what is goth music and what isn't. Some artists have a few goth songs, but then they can't be called goth, and some things kind of sound goth, but they are not goth, or they don't sound goth, but they are. It's just a really hard thing to talk about, actually, because yeah, there's just a lot of discussion about this, or maybe there isn't discussion, but there's just some people who are wrong about it and there's people who are right about it. I don't actually know. If you are not into Bauhaus, you can still be goth. Maybe you like one of the more new goth bands. That is still goth music, so you're still a goth, in my opinion. If you want to call yourself a goth, you can. If you think you're a goth, you can be that. It's just that if you say that you listen to goth music and you mean Slipknot or you mean metal music, you aren't actually really correct, because it's not really the same thing. But yeah, there's just a lot of misconceptions about this. But yeah, I think what I'm saying right now is all the facts. Correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong. So this misconception is kind of a sad one, I think, and it's more towards the people who are new to the goth community. And it's the misconception that all goths are gatekeepers, or that all goths are really judgmental. Being goth, calling yourself goth, is kind of a difficult thing, because a lot of people will judge you and say that you aren't goth, or you don't dress goth enough, or the music that you listen to isn't goth enough, and just all that. So a lot of people who are new to being goth think that every goth they will ever meet will judge them that they are not goth enough. And the sad thing is, this is kind of half true, because there are actually, sadly, still some goths that are kind of gatekeeping and who tell all the new goths or some other goths that they aren't really goth because you don't dress goth, or you aren't wearing a certain brand, or you don't wear enough black, or you don't listen to the right music, or you don't act enough like a goth. But even though you see this a lot online, I think most of the goths are really welcoming. Like me, for example, I'm really happy when someone tells me that they are into goth and are new to being goth. It just makes me really happy to think that there's still a lot of people who are starting to really love being goth and the goth music and the goth subculture. It just makes me really happy to hear that. But there's just some people who are, maybe they're jealous, or maybe they just feel kind of protective of the goth thing, or they actually might believe that some people are posers, which I'm sure there are some, but I don't think you should call someone a poser. But I can tell you, most of the more elderly goth people are actually really welcoming. They're always happy to hear that goth hasn't gone extinct, and they're also just really open-minded. And in my experience, I don't think I've ever seen someone who has been goth for years who has actually judged others because they're not goth enough. I don't think that really happens a lot. You don't really need to be afraid of this. You don't need to be afraid of meeting new goths or meeting new people online who are goth because you are like scared that they will judge you, because most people just don't judge you. And if you meet someone who does judge you, they are just not someone you want to be around, you want to be friends with. They're not someone that you should try to be good enough for, because if they say you're not good enough, you'll probably never be good enough for them, and you don't want to be friends with someone who is like that. So if you do meet people who are mean to you in that way, just try to let those people go and meet some new people, because let me just tell you, most goth people are just really open-minded and really welcoming and really happy to have new goths and baby bats around. So you really don't have to be afraid to just be who you are. You can wear whatever you like, you can listen to whatever you like, you can call yourself goth without being scared, because not all goths are gatekeepers, and most of us are not as judgmental as you've probably seen online. Don't be afraid that everyone is like that. We aren't. So this is kind of a weird misconception, because I don't actually know if a lot of people believe in this. There's this misconception that goths hate everything and everyone. If you've ever seen Victorious, like the television program, there's this goth girl in it who is called Jade, I believe. And it's kind of like a joke thing that she hates everything. There's one episode where she has to name everything that she hates, and she just goes on and on talking about everything that she hates, and it doesn't stop, and she's naming like everything that exists in the whole world. and she hates all of that and all those people. I've actually experienced this misconception myself when I used to go to school, like probably high school, how you guys call it. There was a lot of people who thought I was mean or that I hated everyone around me because I dressed kind of dark. And I do really have a resting bitch face, but that has nothing to do with being goth. But yeah, there are some people who actually think that goths are mean and that they hate everyone and everything. I can be really quick and simple about this. We don't. We don't hate everything and we don't hate everyone. It's not really a typical thing for us to be hateful. Even if we look kind of scary and even if we're into really dark things, we are usually not really hateful people. I mean, of course, there's some things that we don't like, but most goths that I've met and most goths that I know from online are really cheerful and really kind and nice and cute and adorable people. And maybe they're just dark, which makes you assume that they have a certain personality, but most goths just are really cheerful and are not hateful at all. So yeah, those were all the misconceptions that I could think of for now. If you know any more misconceptions, let me know in the comments so maybe I can make a new video about it. If you haven't watched my previous videos about misconceptions, go watch them now. I'll put the links in the description below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing to my channel, leave a like and a comment on the video, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!